looked at today is is a well-known pasuk. We all know it. Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokechem, where the Torah says that we must be tamim. We must be. Well, let's see what tamim means. so Rashi tells us. If we look at the psukim, Rashi is quite kind of quite clear what he says. Rashi says, "Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha," yet you must be pure. Because what? Just sorry, a little bit of backtrack. It's talking about not being like the nations of Israel of Canaan, that the Jewish people are going to kick out of the land. Who they are so involved in some type of magic and sorcery, in things that are on a like. Either they are irrational or esoteric and involved in like the spiritual worlds that we don't understand, or they're just completely irrational and silly things. And so they call what the Torah calls To'avat Hashem. They despicable and abhorrent to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What we have to be is Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Lokecha. We have to be Tamim. So Rashi says, what does that mean? Hitalech imo b'tmimut. You must walk with him in Tmimut. Now, Tmimut is a difficult word to understand, because when we identify the word Tam, we normally identify that with this chap in the Haggadah. There are 4 sons, one of them the Chacham and the Rasha, then there's the Tam and the She'ena Yodeh Lish'ol. And the Tam generally is the one that we translate as being the simple son. But the problem with that is that Yaakov Avinu is called an Ish Tam Yoshev Alim. He certainly wasn't a simple person, a very complex personality. And he certainly wasn't Tam. Sometimes we say like intellectually challenged in some way, but that's not what Tam means. Tamimut means completeness, and we'll see how that manifests itself in a little bit later. So Rashi says that you must walk with him in Tamimut, in a complete, in a sense of completion. And you must look towards Hashem. And don't look towards the future. I mean, we have to move away from this desire to know what's going to happen, but rather be present within where we are. Whatever happens, whatever comes to you, you have to accept. You have to expect with tmimut that it's coming from Hashem for a reason, for a purpose. And when we recognize that, then we'll be part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and a chelek of Hashem, and be kind of like connected to Hashem in that way. Now, the Rav Nebenzahl has a whole discussion on this concept of tmimut, and he's the one who points out that this idea of Yaakov Avinu as Ish Tam Yoshev Halim. So therefore, he says it must be in HaTorah medaberet al tmimut. The mashmaut shel shleimut, he says, that the Torah, when it speaks about this concept of tmimut, is talking about completion. Ha'adam ha'tamim, b'tamtzit ha'inyan hu adam ha'shalem. That a person who is tamim, in the essence of that, it means that that person is shalem. They are complete. And what does that mean, that they are complete? It means that everything that they do is within the parameters that they set for themselves, and which are the parameters that are appropriate according to what the Torah says. Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. There has to be this completion within Hashem. And then he quotes Rav Nebenzahl. He says that sometimes what happens is when a person is not tamim, yesh anashim she'at ma shehem lo yocholim lirot b'rishut. So sometimes there are people that are not tamim, and when it means that they're not tamim, it means that they move away from that holistic system into a new system which they're not supposed to look into. They go a little bit out. They move off. Like we speak about going off the derech. It's not really what he's talking about. He's saying that we set a path for ourselves, and that's the path of Torah. And we have to be careful, and we all do it in times, and that's really the purpose of this period of time of Elul, of going into Rosh Hashanah and going into Yom Kippur, is that we all deviate a little bit. He says, but what is the issue of the deviation, and how do we deviate? So he says, for example, Shaul HaMelech said, I want to know the future. I can't see it in the Urim V'Tumim, and the Nevi'im are not going to tell me. So what am I going to do? As I'm going to go outside of the parameters of Tmimut and go and ask the diviners who were able to bring up Shmuel Hanavi's um, spirit in order for Shaul to try and understand what's going on. And therefore he says, Bishvil lirot mashu shmanyen oti. Why would I do such a thing? Why would I deviate from this path of Tumut? Because I want to know something that interests me, something that's important to me. I go out of it. So when we start working within ourselves and desiring stuff for ourselves, and it's all about me, then I move myself out of Tmimut, because it's Tamim Tiyeh im Hashem Elokeichem. We have to have Tmimut with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, not with ourselves. And ultimately, he says, Rav Nebensol, that the concept of Tmimut, and I think this is such a beautiful idea, is Hayacholet Lekabel. To be able to be Tamim means that I'm able to humble myself. I'm able to not see myself as the primary focus of everything. And if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to accept things. I'm able to accept feedback from people. I'm able to accept that perhaps the manner in which I'm behaving on one level is a manner that needs to be revisited, and take that feedback and move forward. And says Rav Nebensol, it's not only that. It's not only they're able to accept feedback on me. If a person can stand next to something, whether it's a person, or something, or something beautiful to look at, or an inyan, or just an idea, and to actually accept that idea, or shall call davar bo nitkal. Or, so in other words, can we accept it, take it in, process it, and then have that kind of like conversation or negotiation around that? Or do we just simply say, let me show you, let me play devil's advocate? And that concept of playing devil's advocate, says Rav Nebensol, is sometimes against the concept of Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Lakechem. Sometimes you just have to accept what happens, allow it to be processed in a real and proper way, and only then come out with the things that we need to express. And what is fascinating is that I saw on this concept of Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Lakechem that the idea is that really just being complete within the words, within that which Hashem has given us. And part of it is, as Chazal explained, not to engage in the way of the what we call the Darchei Amori, in all the superstition and all these things that we get into. But now that's fascinating, because we've just come out of the 3 weeks. We've come out of the 3 weeks, and in the 3 weeks have these 9 days. And in these 9 days, we have this issue where everybody has their own chumras in the 9 days. But part of the 9 days and the 3 weeks is, we don't do this because it's bad muzzle. We don't do this because it's good muzzle. And we try not to engage in legal cases against the non-Jews because there is bad muzzle. So what is this whole business about bad muzzle? Isn't that a little bit of superstition and stuff, and not being tamimim Hashem, that whatever Hashem, kol mashi yavo alecha kabel b'tmimut, as Rashi says, whatever Hashem throws to us, we should accept with tmimut. So there's a lot of discussion on that. But I found in the Aruch HaShulchan, the Aruch HaShulchan is really, for me, is one of the most beautiful svarim. It's a halacha sefer. It's not the Shulchan Aruch. It's the Aruch HaShulchan, which was is compiled in I think the late 1800s by not Rabbi Levi Epstein, his father. He was one of the Gedolim of Lita, of Lithuanian Jewry, and he put this out, a halacha sefer, for people to be able to, number one, easily get to the halacha, but also to understand it in a much broader context. So, for example, the Shulchan Aruch will give a statement, but it won't give all the arguments underneath it. And that's where the Mishnah Berurah, as we understand it, which is one of the primary halachic sefers today, that's how it brings. But the Aruch HaShulchan brings in a much broader argument than just the Mishnah Berurah's argument. So concerning weddings, comes along the Aruch HaShulchan and says the following. That the minhag is that we don't get married in the second half of the month. We get married in the first half of the month. Why? When the moon is getting fuller and fuller and fuller. So he said, but if that's the case, then why do we do that? So why would we do that? Because the moon getting fuller is a symbol of bracha. He says, he says, don't think it's like type of magic, it's not going against this concept of not being involved in all these different type of superstitious things. Just a siman tov. It's a good sign. He says in the same way as that when you anoint a king, you take him to the river. Why do you take them to the river? Because you want, in the same way as the river is flowing, so too their malchus, their reign should be flowing. And he says a whole different thing. He says in the old day what they would do is they would pour this wine through these long pipes in front of the chasanim, in front of the grooms. And that's also a siman for goodness, and that the couple should grow and they should continue to flow in the same way as the wine flows, in the same way as the river flows for the king. He says, and don't think that that's superstitious. It's just a symbol. It's like we have even on Rosh Hashanah. Even on Rosh Hashanah, we have these, that you take an apple and you dip it into honey and you say, it should be a Shana Tova Al Mitzvah. What are you doing? Or is it, do you need the apple and the honey? Or is that like some type of magic? No, it's not. It's just a siman. It's just a symbol upon which we can attach a bracha. And that's why all of these words, all of these different symbols that we have over Rosh Hashanah are just symbols upon which we can attach a bracha. You don't need them. You can just say them, but it's a nice thing to have some type of like a multimedia experience. He says there are certain months where we don't have this hakpada. We don't worry so much about marrying in the beginning of the month. We're happy to marry any time of the month. And what are those? Elul and Tishrei and Adar. It says that's Elul and Tishrei and Adar. Elul because it's the Meirat of Elul, which we're in now. Tishrei because it's a great simcha and joy of the month, the beginning of the year. And Adar because Adar, Mishanichnas Adar, Marbi B'Simcha. So obviously it's a simcha tikatam. He says the reality is it's better not to be makpid on any of that stuff. Even though we know that it's not any type of superstition and it's just about mazel tov and all siman tov and these are good signs, whatever. He says, why? Because at the end of the day, it says, Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. We don't rely on specific times, and we don't rely on specific eras and periods of time and little symbols and things, but rather the real thing that we have to look at, says the Aruch HaShulchan, is this concept of Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. And if we are Tamim im Hashem Elokecha, then everything is in perspective. And he says the truth is, okay. Says, so why would it be, if we're supposed to be Tamim im Hashem Elokecha, why is it that we may have set up these marriages in the first part of the month? He says maybe it's just simple, we are compared to the moon, and therefore we have this minhag to be a little bit more strict. Just because it's like the moon, we want to be part of that process. He says the reality is, you don't have to be strict on it to not get married in the second half of the month. But it's just like a siman tov. It's a nice idea in which to attach ourselves, but we have to be very careful, because what happens with all of these siman tovs, all of these lovely simanim, all of these different things, right? What we become obsessed in the minhagim of these things. We become obsessed in not seeing them for what they really are, but saying, if I don't get married in the first half of the month, it's not a siman tov. That's not correct. Marriage in itself is the simcha, and that is what Aruch HaShulchan is saying. Tamim tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. The most important thing is not the siman. The most important thing is the connection with the Ribono Shel Olam, as Rashi makes it very, very clear. He says Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokechem. Rashi says, and he completes it in the most beautiful way, that if as then when we clear that everything is part of this process of Hashem's direct role in our lives, as then we'll be with him and part of him. And what means to be a chelek of Hashem is that our neshamas connect to him in the most profound, wonderful way, and that gives us the true Ashrecha Yisrael, the true simcha and joy of our lives. Have a